Season 6, happy new start. There are already 5 seasons complete, 12 episodes each at any podcast platform.
We have already hosted quite a number of guests in our podcast who shared their curiosity, their experience, their approaches to learning, teaching, living in new environments, and also building up skill sets.
It's all around living and learning together and getting inspired.
Whenever you think it is appropriate for you to see the depths of growth mindset, the depths of live and learn philosophy, just join and enjoy. So welcome to our season 6, Live and Learn with us.
Live and learn.
Welcome, Edoardo. Welcome here. You are such a famous person for me to invite. As you're our brother podcaster, so you are our brother trainer and coach. You are the mentor in the same program we were mentors at Berlearn. What you share with Ina is love and passion to Italy. And what we share, all three of us together, is the idea of making the world a little bit better by providing the support to those who want to fly higher. What of what I said is not true?
Well, nothing. It's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. Maybe just the fact that the love for Italy wasn't really grown into me. I kind of was born there. So it's kind of started by default by like, yeah, sure, I know this, might as well love it. But sure, I do love Italy, but I love Germany as well because I've chosen to live here. But hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. And yeah, happy we finally made it.
Actually, that's true. And the funny thing that with the Corona time, we met 3 years ago, I think, with Edoardo live. Then we were supporting each other podcasts, each other efforts via social media. And then a month ago, we actually met again at the Berlearn mentorship picnic once it was possible to meet. And that was such a lovely thing that we immediately agreed to have you as a guest. We're super happy to have you at this moment with us, sharing your experience and passions.
Yeah, happy to be here as well. And do you actually remember exactly when and where we met? It was one of my early events that I used to do back in the days when doing live events was still the normality, like meetups and having everybody in the same room, something that sounds so weird and far away today. But yeah, it was one of those events. And then loosely we kept in touch until, well, we're still in touch. And yes, we did bump last month into each other at the picnic.
So it's possible to do things both online and remotely, as well as live when it's possible, as soon as it's possible, because one of the things that we'd like to ask you about, like coaching, making it easier for other people to do what they love doing, to share what they have to share, which is, of course, possible online. Now we know, after a year, more than a year of doing things, trying things out online, but also even better, sharing emotions live when it's possible. How do you find this thing? What is it like for you, sharing your experience with people you coach, seeing what they can do, which ways they prefer? How has it been recently?
Well, recently it's a vague term because it's been almost a year, but depends what you see recently. But it's definitely been a change. What I've noticed is that, I mean, for me, nothing beats the level of connection you have in person. Because, well, we are evolutionarily, pass me the term, we have never had computers. So our interaction, the way we learned to interact was always just in person, in front of each other. Sure, we got used to telephones over the years, we got used to video calls and so on, but we never have been this extreme into remote. For me, in order to get something similar to the connection you'd have in person, remotely, I always find that you need to put your energy level slightly beyond what your normal level of energy will be. I'm not talking about being a clown, of course, but I'm talking about the fact that in order to keep someone's attention and keep people engaged in a remote situation, you need to be able to up your energy, be more entertaining in a way, regardless of what you're doing. But because I find that emotions are less able to pass via a video camera or a screen or whatever, you need to push them up a lot more. One of the things that I really found difficult and missing in the beginning was the fact that when you are on a screen, it's impossible to look at each other in the eyes. Because if I want to look at you, like I'm doing right now, I'm looking into a camera. But the fact that I look into a camera means that I'm not looking at your faces, and vice versa. So I can look at you in the eyes, but I cannot have that. So somewhere in there is some sort of connection missing.
The very presentation will continue being a part of the whole podcast, because you're such a multifaceted professional. So, and I think the very idea that you started talking about emotional intelligence just immediately shows that you have the expertise in that. So, would you share the book and the podcast that you have, so that we know which questions our listeners could refer to already published materials?
My podcast is called Snippets of Leadership, and it's 2 to 5 minutes each episode, so you can just get something quick and easy as on your way to work or whatever. And the book and the video course that I had done back in the days is called Emotional Intelligence for Leaders. And it's something very short, very scientific, but very practical. It's targeted for people who need to manage others and that are looking for a practical method to become better at managing their emotions, handling them, and influencing others. There is, of course, a lot more to it, but if you go on my website, there is some free material you can see. And if you look emotional intelligence test up on my site, you can take it for free. It's something to give you a quick assessment, and it's also connected to the book.
Yeah, sure. And this is something that you presented over the Agile conference back in April, having a great success over the scientific part of it, targeted part of it, that you have a crafted answer, and that is full of the specific orientation for what people are seeking. So basically fulfilling their needs. Could you expand a little bit on what makes you so focused on this scientific part? So why is this part engaging you?
Long story short, there is way too much vagueness around. There is a lot of people and a lot of material that I see online that is engaging, inspiring, nice, easy reading, easy listening even. But the question that I ask myself when I read it is this real? Is this relevant? Can I rely on this? Because as much as I want to know that something that I read on the blog is useful for me, I don't know, the best 3 ways to give feedback or the best 10 methods to be empathetic, whatever you want to put it. But there is a lot of material like this. And a lot of people I know use material like that and rely on it. But the point is that if ethically I want to provide something to my clients, my readers, my listeners, I want to make sure that what I give them is something that they can use and that I can guarantee that is real, it's useful, and it's relevant. Otherwise, it's all just a nice little story I'm making up in my head, and it's just purely entertainment value. But if I can give you entertainment value by being funny or being more energetic, like I was saying before, but I can also give you something that is real, that is scientific, that can have impacts for you as well, then that's a winner. Then I feel like that's the only way I'm really doing my job. Otherwise, sure, I can blurb about anything. I heard one person, I don't remember the name, and probably it's a good thing, but they were talking about what your sleeping position tells about your character. which is something that makes absolutely no sense from a scientific perspective. But this person was going all about like, studies show that if you sleep in an open position and if you sleep in a closed position, you're more this person, you're more that person. And that is just horrible. And I don't want to be associated with those people. And I don't want to give people that work with me or that I work with anything remotely close to that level of BS.
I saw a very similar test somewhere that made me laugh, really, that said, look at the picture and say which first thing or object or something you would pick up in case you only had a chance to pick up one. And there's a baby crying, the kettle boiling, the telephone ringing, and the dog scratching the sofa. Mm-hmm. And then the test goes like, if you choose the baby first, you are an empathetic person. Like, sure, you have to pick up the baby first because it's the need and okay, if the telephone is ringing or the dog is scratching the sofa, it's not the first level need that you need to satisfy. Then, okay, if you're picking up the kettle that is boiling, you're a non-sensitive, egoistic person. Like, really? But it's fire emergency if it's boiling and I don't do anything. And pick up the phone instead, which shows me, according to these scientists, pun intended, a sociable person. Edoardo, do you still hold your own research, or do you base your work now on already existing research that you find somewhere or someone you collaborate with?
Half and half. Actually, no, not half and half. I mostly base myself on scientific papers that I read. Yes, I am that level of a nerd, but when I look, for example, I work a lot with leadership right now, and I look at leader-member exchange, the way a relationship is built, and I like to rely on studies that have been done. Because I know that whatever has been published on a reliable paper has been tested, has been peer-reviewed, has been done with a proper methodology, and despite it being very inaccessible, it's real. I do have some limited data that comes, from example, from the emotional intelligence test that I mentioned before, and that shows me a bit where participants are more or less in doubt about their ability or more sure of their ability. But that's a limited sample. Of course, I take it with a pinch of salt because I don't have any control on who takes the test. I cannot make sure that it's unbiased, et cetera, et cetera. So because it's not always easy to make that level of research, and I don't have the resources or the reason to do it, I most of the time rely on other papers.
Do you miss your own research?
I kind of. I mean, I would love to have more data. I mean, I love working with data. Who am I kidding? But I do. It was a huge part of me. Like, give me an Excel table with 60,000 lines and I'm happy. But no, it's true. I mean, right now for me, it's not really something relevant. Sure, I could do it. I miss doing it. But right now it's more collaborating with clients. It's more focusing on this part of work and this part of the business that I'm running, that I'm trying to run despite the whole pandemic. Let's be honest here. No, it's actually going much better now.
Fantastic. Congratulations. You know, showing this kind of honesty and even vulnerability to pandemics, to VUCA, to all this volatility and uncertainty immediately creates trust. You know, like whenever you're saying like, who am I kidding? Let's be completely honest here. You immediately create this sense that you're not pretending or trying to. So is this something that the leaders most probably are here to learn? Creating trust and creating vulnerability rather than standing, strict, direct.
I'm not exactly sure I understood your question, or was it a question? Was it a consideration? Well, I'll just pick up from some words. I heard leadership, I heard sharing, I heard VUCA. So I guess this question or the consideration was whether I see some sort of need or resistance when it comes to leaders I work with to become more vulnerable, to show their flaws, and to step away from their leadership perspective, their model of leadership that is somehow antiquated from command and control perspectives.
Is this kind of a request that is possible or that is coming to you? To learn how to be more open, how to create more trust, how to create connection.
Yes, however, not by people directly involved with it. What I notice is that, of course, generalizing from everyone that I worked with, people who would need this type of work the most are the ones that have the most work to do in that direction. And because of that, I don't want to say they're blind to the issue, but it's not something particularly relevant. Whereas people that work more with others, say HR managers, L&D manager, are much more aware of those topics. So I happen to discuss with them a lot more about vulnerability, about changeability, about communication. But when it comes to managers and leaders, I find that, sure, there are a few ones that get it, that are illuminated, that want to improve there, and I love working with them. However, some other times I find myself working with people that don't see this as a priority, even though it's a problem that they should be working on.
And then there is always that shift from a traditional role of a leader, for example, to a modern view on it, considering how the world is changing and what new needs appear.
Yes, I actually wrote a massive blog post on it that I need to update for this year. My aim is to update it every year, but there are a few changes that I've seen happening in how leaders work, and all of those are, of course, based on research and other data. But there are some trends that are interesting. So first of all, artificial intelligence is taking away much more tasks from managers than we imagine. So last year, this was already in some areas around 24%. So imagine with the acceleration that we had, to what extent it's gone now. Leaders are already being pushed away from tasks and more towards managing people, so more towards the coaching role. Second, if you look at it was last year or 2 years ago at this point, LinkedIn skills report, they were saying that creativity, communication, design thinking were the most important skills for managers. And managers are aware of it. HR managers, L&D are aware of it. So there is this further push towards these softer people skills on the leader's perspective. And there is awareness of it. The point is that when you look at who writes the checks, to just simplify it very much, it's people that have been used to think in terms of strategy, in terms of numbers, in terms of what is measurable. And we all know that communication, soft skills at large, I don't really like the word soft skills, but pass me the term. All of that culture, even at large, it's much more difficult and expensive to measure. So, of course, because the people who write the checks most of the time are used to thinking in terms of strategy, and we always like what we know best. Of course, they're going to be more lenient towards working on strategy issues, which means using tools, using new softwares, using new methods, but less on learning, less on enabling a middle manager to be more of a people's manager, more skill-based, more coaching-based, even though that's definitely the area the whole environment is pushing us towards. My take on this is that the companies that realize it first, the organizations that realize this first, will be having a competitive advantage later on. There should be some awareness at the C-level side, which is not always the case.
But still is much more obvious than even 2, 3, 5 years ago, or even 10 or 15, when nobody has ever been prioritizing such stuff. I think a couple of the episodes ago we mentioned that the well-being and mental health has become a huge issue for the companies, and not only they realized that this is a huge issue, but they were as well somehow almost immediately forcing or introducing or promoting the events like extra days off, or not letting people work in overtime, or trying to prioritize the vacation time against the money that they can have in return for this. So trying to implement the measures, like almost immediately the top companies introduced the measures for the mental health and well-being week. So there is this huge push. It looks like they all came from one forum on mental health and well-being where they were showing the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at what's happening now and the type of dynamics I was brought up to work in as a consultant, I wish there was a bit more awareness back then, because I had a team leader who was boasting about how much she worked and was shown that how much she could just work one day, work overnight, and come to work the next day, and he was really proud of it. Great, well done. No thanks. Unless I have to, unless it's relevant and unless it's an exception, but that was the regular, like the expected baseline.
Yeah, but also this people sometimes forget that they are the role model and that they are setting an example of what is acceptable or necessary or is seen as a norm. We're all creating the environment where the people who come from next generations or younger or less experienced, they are seen as doing it. And this is kind of a weird thing when we're talking about education, right? So we are not only teaching how it is supposed to be, right? So we're supposed to show that we're implementing it. Just like the parents, like a parental advice meme, that you don't need to teach your kid anything, just show what you're doing, he will mimic you, right? So
yeah, like a parent who smokes and says smoking is bad is not a good example. It's not relevant, it's not adequate.
Working 16, 18 hours per day and saying that I'm doing my part and this is norm is the same example.
That's something that keeps on happening. Hopefully there is a bit less of that now. I mean, I always find it weird and borderline insensitive to talk about the good sides of the horrible situation like this one, but at least this might hopefully have showed some how relevant it is to take care of yourself, to balance your working time and your private time, and to show that it's not necessary, it's not even useful to push so much. And it's also, I mean, we were talking earlier about culture, how people are used to talking in terms of culture versus strategy and how culture needs to change, etc., etc. It's a huge world, of course, but if the example stays the same and is passed on generation after generation of workers, then it becomes difficult because it becomes the status quo of how things work within an organization. So there needs to be a heavier change. How? It's a whole completely different discussion, but probably if we had, I don't know, a couple of weeks to talk, we might get somewhere, but probably not for this episode.
No. There are so many people who keep on talking about this and only this that we are not going to steal their work or job. I have the next question. So you keep on talking about well-being, you keep on talking about work and life and so on. So we understood that you are a consultant, you're consulting leadership on the questions of EQ, emotional intelligence, leadership, collaboration. How do you relax out of all of this? How do you spend your life part in this beautiful formula of work, life, sleep balance?
Well, to be very honest, this until I left for vacation, it's been a horrible roller coaster, because with COVID taking place, with a 2-3-year-old son without Kita, and with my work going, I don't know where, because everything changed last year, and luckily somehow I managed to keep it alive. But that I think I survived a lot more in emergency mode, and that was not healthy. So guilty as charged. What I'm trying to do now, I'm honest about it. It's something that probably I wasn't alone in never having experienced anything similar. So I did the best I could. If I had more time to deal with the situation, I would have managed to do it better. But my wife has a full-time job and I have a toddler with no kita, and there is no possibility of, or there was back in the days, no possibility for a babysitter or anything because COVID and lockdowns. So what I'm trying to do now, and I started doing, is making compartments of my time. So making sure that I can be fully intense on work during the day. And the moment I stop and pick up my kid from kita, it's off limits. It's not ideal if you want in terms of timing, because I don't have as many hours and so on. But I noticed that I can be a lot more productive on the hours I have available, and maybe even do something at night should I need to. But I can also, it's also healthier for me as it comes to having a better relationship with my kid, be more relaxed, giving him a better time, because that's also part of it. So that's how I juggle the two. I will let you know next year how I am. I noticed I lost a lot of hair last year trying to keep everything afloat. I see photos of myself now and photos of myself 12 months ago, and there are a lot more bald patches. So I'm pretty sure that whatever I did then was not healthy.
So what doesn't kill you makes you sexier.
Makes you bolder.
I tried my best, Edo.
No, I had hair.
That's great. You mentioned kita, which for some of our listeners could be a new word. It's a German word that means something like kindergarten, nursery school, daycare, whatever. And which could show you're using this word, could show that you are living in an international environment. Probably you speak English, but judging from the word, you live in Germany.
Yes.
Well, actually, we do know that. Have you got any international experience of coaching people who come from other cultures, from other mentalities, connected with the well-being, with organizing their work-life balance, with being a leader? How does it differ in your experience, if you have any, in these terms?
I do have experience. I mean, most of my clients are, I'm trying to keep it as anonymous as possible. Most of my clients do not have the same nationality of the country they live in. And I'm not just talking about Germany. That said, though, sure, there are differences on a case-to-case basis, but I'm not sure if it's applicable to a whole country issue. I mean, based on my own experience, you always need to find what makes the person tick and how the person reacts and how to deal with the person. And you need to adapt your phrasing and the way you express concepts to whoever is in front of you. But that's not more so much of a nationality or a background or a cultural issue, which sure has a role in there, but it's more of a personal, like you look at the person that is in front of you, look at all those factors and react to it. So I would take the idea of making clusters culturally based on the data I have, going back onto numbers, with a pinch of salt.
That's a move forward towards more and more individual approach in working. Yeah, if earlier, and I'm talking about much earlier, there was like this way of doing things, this way of being a leader, this way of building whatever strategy you have to build in corporate world, in your career, whatever. Then there was a shift to realizing there are some differences between, I don't know, between genders, between people from having different backgrounds and so on. What you're talking about now is a further move to taking into account personal, individual things rather than even background, origin, nationality.
To be honest, I kind of tend to simplify this. I wouldn't even say too much, but you started your question, your consideration, saying that there was a certain way of doing things, that the way things should be done in order to get something done, which I personally think, based on everything I've done and I've seen so far within companies, leading others, being led by others, and working as a consultant, well, why should you care about how something is done, provided it's not illegal, provided it's not ruining others or costing too much money? But If someone manages to reach the goal that he or she was given within the set timeline and everything works well, what do you care if it was done your way or another? Yet and still, there is this idea that you need to control that things are done exactly this way. Hopefully, this is going to fade out. But sure, there is a personal approach into it. And sure, the assumption behind it is that the person that is given the task is actually able to perform the task well. But once you have someone who is able to do it, who is willing to do it, and can do it, why the hell should we care about how it's done? That's one of the things that I'm trying to push further on. It's done. It's finished. It's done on time. Who cares if the person has taken 6 days off and worked 24 hours in one go the seventh? If that's that person's way of working and it works, why not?
Factory time goes back. 1900s are gone, and rip the 1900s. We're living in already the 21st century, and the move towards the human-centered leadership is more than ever, vivid and is taking place. We are, though, the Growth Mindset and Live and Learn podcast. What do you think of growth mindset in terms of leadership? So obviously, most of the leadership positions are strategy-based, vision-based, and, growth-based by default, by the definition. But do their individual features, thinking, mindset is that much of a growth mindset, would you say?
Can you define growth mindset for you in the exact term?
Carol Dweck defined the growth mindset as thinking for the opportunities rather than obstacles, being proactive rather than thinking that it's not going to happen, thinking that you have capacity, resources, and looking for the resources and skills to learn how to do this rather than saying, oh, this is talent, or they have more resources, or I'm not worthy, or I have an imposter syndrome, and, not taking an opportunity. Just like Eminem sang, take that one shot, one opportunity. Carol Dweck fans would just kill me at the moment, quoting
Right.
Eminem here.
Sure. Yeah. Shout out to Eminem. Well, yes, I agree with every single thing you said, as long as it doesn't become naive. It's always, might be my cynical part in here, but having a growth mindset, being optimistic, having a vision, all of that will work as long as you build yourself up to make sure it can work. As long as you've done the work on yourself, that you've built the skills, that you've done the proper background work in order for this to function well. Otherwise, if you are a complete knob and don't your foot from your mouth, well, having a growth mindset just will turn to you being naive and not making sure that you can actually do the job that you need to carry out. So sure, all of this works. I agree with the fact that leaders need to have a growth mindset, but per se, it needs to be put in context. It needs to be put in the context of have a growth mindset and give yourself and be aware of the instruments and the tools and the skills that you need to acquire in order to support that mindset and get to those results. Otherwise, if you just have a vision of where you want to be, it's great. It will make you happy, it will make you inspired. If you have a vision and a plan, which is a lot less fun to make because it involves work, it involves writing goals down, writing, using OKRs if you want, etc. If you have those two in place, vision and plan, then you get somewhere. If you just have a vision, you're basically just daydreaming.
So we talked about emotional intelligence. We talked about scientific basics of dealing with the information, of having the scientific approach rather than fake news and easy recipes. We discussed the well-being and life, live, sleep, well-being balance. So we discussed how the leadership has evolved and how the human-centered leadership is becoming the big new thing. And you also shared how you see leadership as coaching, as enabling people and giving them more tools to learn about themselves. What else can you say about the learning and living of what you're learning principle? So is there something that becomes a cherry on a pie from this perspective?
Not sure if it's exactly in the direction you were talking about. When you mentioned all those topics and you ended up with a question, my immediate gut answer would be keep on looking around for things that seemingly have no connection to what you're doing. I noticed that some of the most interesting ideas that I had, that I use in my workshops, that I use in my coaching, come from books that I have read on, I don't know, on video editing, on anecdotes that I have found here and there, from comedy, stuff that I've seen happening around. It's not everything that is useful comes from one specific area. So if you're looking at, we've been talking about leadership, don't just rely on leadership. Sure, have that basis. I'm not saying just ignore it. Don't be afraid of looking outside and connecting other topics to what you see and finding your own connection. If the content is good, if what you're basing yourself is good, then the connection will probably be interesting as well and give a bit more value to what you do.
Beautiful. That sounds like a great formulation of your own live and learn philosophy.
Sure, I'll take that.
It's a great conclusion, first of all, and the whole talk was a treat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to be here, to be as a guest for once in a podcast. Yay, hope to meet you again in person in Berlin quite soon.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming here to us and sharing your experience, your thoughts, and your unconventional thinking, taking lessons from everywhere, from your perspective, from your horizon. Thank you for being here, and we really hope to see each other soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you share Live and Learn philosophy, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all the major social media, comment, and spread the word about this podcast so that more people could get their weekly portion of growth mindset content. Live and learn.